Hi everybody, welcome back to the Stellium Astrology Podcast. I'm Stephanie James, I'm your host. I'm also the founder of stelliumastrology.com. I used to write horoscopes for Elle magazine and I now work as a tutor for the London School of Astrology. I am also working on a kind of exciting podcast project with a couple of other people, which I will reveal more details about as the time comes, and I will hook you up with that to listen to. And I will give you more details down the line, but let me tell you, it's quite exciting for me to be involved in. I've got a Patreon page which I'm currently building content for. It's at the moment I've just released the full moon post for this month. I've done a new moon post. I've done a few different things. I've got a Mercury retrograde post in the pipeline that's coming out pretty soon. Before Mercury goes retrograde anyway, so that you can prepare for it. And I'm going to be putting up the overview for February pretty soon as well, so please do go check that out. I have made one of the posts public, so you can go on there and enjoy checking out what kind of thing you could expect. And so today I'm talking about the planet Venus, and Venus is known as the lesser benefic. And the lesser benefic, if you think about the word beneficial, beneficent, we're talking about something that is considered to be bountiful, really, and positive, if you're going to use those kind of words. And Venus is the lesser planet. We do have a greater benefic called Jupiter, which we will get onto when we do the social planets. But for now, we're doing the personal planets. And just to give you a rough idea of why they're called the personal planets, Mercury, Venus and Mars being the first three planets that we look at in astrology, aside from the luminaries, which are the Sun and the Moon. The three planets, Mercury, Venus and Mars, which we call the personal planets, have a very personal interaction with the natal chart because they move quite fast. It means that where they fall in your chart really does have quite a strong influence over certain aspects of the native's personality. If we were looking at something like the transpersonal planets or the social planets like Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, those planets move a lot more slowly. For example, Jupiter takes about a year per sign, Saturn takes about 2.5 years a sign, and then Uranus, Neptune and Pluto are about 7, 14 and and more. When it comes to Pluto, it's very slow. It's been in Capricorn since 2008, and it's not leaving until, I think, 2026 or something. So that gives you an idea of how slow Pluto moves. And obviously, if a planet moves that slowly, and many people are born with Pluto in Capricorn, for example, so anybody born from 2008 onwards at the moment are all going to have Pluto in Capricorn. So those planets really do influence generations. And whereas Jupiter and Saturn, they spend a little bit less time. So a year for Jupiter, about 2.5 years for Saturn. So usually you find with those planets that you find people of your same peer group. So if you're at school, those people that are in your year at school will all have those kind of planets. And you'll have similar experiences go through that as a kind of collective generation in a sense. So the personal planets, they move so quickly that you can be in the same class as somebody and have completely different personal planets, as opposed to all of you having the same Jupiter or all of you having the same Saturn. So it's interesting that their chart can give you, it can lump you in with some people, and it can completely individualise you from others. So the personal planets are really key in astrology, and it's important not to overlook them. It can be sometimes quite easy if you're looking at the chart and you're doing sun, moon and ascendant, to just really zone in on those, and then you might look and go, oh wow, look, you've got some sort of thing going on with Pluto. I would say that the transpersonal planets, the furthest planets from the sun, are less influential over the personality unless they feed into the sun or the moon in some way, or they're angular. That's a whole nother conversation for later on, but it's worth noting. Don't get too bogged down with trying to understand everything in the chart. The first and best thing you can do is really work on the sun and the moon and the ascendant, and then trying to understand what the personal planets mean to that person. So Venus is visible to the naked eye in the same way that all of the traditional planets, so that's Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn they're all visible to the naked eye. When we developed technology, computers, telescopes and that kind of thing, it was easier to discover and then therefore actually see the further bodies from the sun. But up to Saturn was something we could see without having to, have any kind of technology. So these are the traditional planets, and they have been so appointed since the beginning of astrology. Records have, the earlier, basically we just don't know when astrology actually really came about. And, we've got records going back to ancient Babylon and Mesopotamia, that kind of thing. But we don't know whether those people actually created it or if it goes back even earlier than that. My suspicion is that it does. I am an 8th house sun and a Scorpio moon, and I just love delving into mysteries. Anyway, Venus is naked, visible to the naked eye. Venus is not naked, but she is visible to the naked eye. And she's always been worshipped for her beauty. She's a stunning star to look at. And if you ever happen to be out, depending on whether Venus is rising before the sun in the morning or if she's setting after the sun in the evening, you have two different styles of Venus. You have Venus who wakes men up for war in the morning or puts them to bed in the evening. So the way to know which type of Venus you have, and I think it's Occidental or Oriental Venus, and I can't remember which one's which now off the top of my head, but Venus setting before the sun, so you wouldn't see her in the evening, you'd see her in the morning. If you have that in your chart, Venus will be on the right of the sun, the right hand side, whereas if Venus is on the left hand side, it means she's setting, which means she's a much more seductive and softer Venus, whereas if she's in front of the sun, she's a bit more warlike. And remember, let's not forget that Venus is considered to be a beautiful, peace-loving planet, but actually she's also a war goddess. So yes, without getting too bogged down with all of that, I thought I would let you know that she spends, it takes her about 225 days to orbit the sun. And, here it says, I'm just reading the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook, by the way, great book to refer to. Her slow rotation of 243 days means that Venus has no magnetic field. So it says here, Sue Tompkins says, reflecting the psychological quality of passivity with which it is associated. And yes, Venus doesn't go retrograde every year. Approximately Venus goes retrograde like once every year and a half, roughly. But when she goes retrograde, she's never retrograde for more than 43 days. So she is going retrograde this year, but she's going retrograde, I think, on the 19th of December. And she went retrograde last year, I think, in April. So you can see that there's quite a big space of time between. And definitely a lot more often than Mercury retrograde, for example. So Venus rules Taurus and Libra, and again we have, just like Mercury in Gemini or Virgo, we have a passive sign and an active sign, and that means that Venus has a passive and an active expression as well. So I believe that Libra is the active sign and Taurus is the passive sign, and when I talked about that before, it was kind of active kind of means masculine, passive means feminine, but it's more about whether it's a conscious, outgoing energy or whether it's a much more unconscious or subconscious energy that's not so aware of itself and a bit more, I'm going to say demure, but it's not so out there, it's not so forthcoming. So Venus has two expressions in the zodiac. It takes Venus about 1 degree a day, so she goes through each zodiac sign about the same speed as the sun. I think it's a bit different because Venus also gets out of sync with the sun and has to catch up, and that's why sometimes Venus is in front of the sun or behind. The glyph for Venus is it's like a vanity glass. It's a circle, which the circle sort of represents completion, and the cross, I believe, represents earthly matters as well. So that is the looking or vanity glass. which is quite appropriate really if you think about the fact that Venus is a goddess of beauty. And you may have heard of various mythological stories of Venus, but we do have Aphrodite in Greek mythology. In Roman mythology, she was called Venus. In Norse mythology, she's Freya. And if anybody's watching Vikings at the moment, Freya is actually in it. That's not a spoiler for anybody. It's interesting. I love the show Vikings. I really love it. And I love Norse mythology as well. So I'm really, really into it. And just seeing the fact that they put Freya in there is interesting because she's not what you would expect her to be. And she has a lot of opportunities to be quite jealous. But she doesn't display that quality, which I think is lovely because it really shows a sense of what the true Venusian understanding of fairness and equality and being gentle can be like as well. And just to go back on mythologies, we've got Ishtar as well in Babylonian mythology too. So there are various myths around Venus, and there's so many more. I'm not listing them all. But really the archetype for Venus is the anima, Carl Jung's anima, and also it's the feminine archetype in the chart and the young girl. So actually if you are a mum or dad and you have daughters, Venus will symbolise your daughters in your natal chart. And as women, if you look at your chart, if you are a mature woman, or if you're in your adulthood, Venus will not only represent if you have children of your own, like your daughters, it will also represent what you were like when you were younger as well. So you as a young girl. For example, I'm going to use myself as I always do. I have Venus in Aquarius, but I have Sun in Capricorn, and I have Moon in Scorpio, okay? So you'd think, well, Capricorn's sensible, doesn't ever break the rules. It's kind of a bit of a stickler for the rules, actually, stuck in the mud kind of person. But actually, when I was at Venus in Aquarius growing up as a young girl and teenager, I was an absolute tearaway. I was a rebel. I was anti-establishment, listened to punk music and rock music. I just was not ever going to be anything that anybody expected me to be. Yes, I'm growing up into being a Capricorn, but that young Venus, that young rebellious Venus, and not every Venus in Aquarius is going to be a rebel. I did happen to be having a Uranus transit over my Aquarius stellium as a teenager, which is just a recipe for disaster. Anyway, my poor mum. I feel so sorry for her. I was such a nightmare. But yes, my Scorpio moon is the woman that I become as I get older, as I mature, as I step into the more mature feminine archetype. So it'll be interesting if you think about what you were like when you were younger and then look at your Venus placement, if you're a woman or if you are a man. What they say with Venus is that men look for their Venus in a relationship. When they're, in a romantic relationship, they're seeking out their Venus, and they end up marrying their moon. And what happens normally is, they go for what they consider to be this attractive young feminine archetype, and then when they get to that kind of routine living with their partner on a daily basis, the moon, their wife becomes their moon. So it then becomes, you could laugh that the moon is the mother and they end up marrying their mothers, but actually it could just be that they are, that's it. Our moon is our most comfortable, our most habitual place. So it can be a sense of comfort. It depends if there is a conflict between Venus and the moon. Maybe there's a square there, or if there's a conflict between the man's Venus and Mars placements, because obviously Venus is what they're looking for in a relationship. It describes where they're comfortable and what they're attracted to. So if there is a conflict there, if there is a kind of a disagreement between the planets in some way or another, it can be difficult for men to feel completely fulfilled with their Venus and their moon if they're not in good communication with each other. So I always thought that was quite interesting. It definitely is. If you look at relationship charts, it's definitely interesting to look at celebrities that, maybe the whole story about, like maybe Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston off the top of my head, or maybe Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Now, I'm not going to go into that because that's a relationship episode, but Venus is a relationship indicator in the chart. Really, we learn about relationships first from our parents, and, if we've got siblings, we learn about relationships with our siblings, but a different type of relationship. But you can almost say that they're role models, and these planets, how we develop into the humans that we become, it's all very much down to the development of each planet on an individual level, which does get played out through role models when you're younger. And as you get older, you embody these planets as you experience them and go through the trials and tribulations of dating, and everything else that comes with it. Oh my gosh, my dating history. Oh goodness me, that's a season. I could do a whole season of episodes on my dating history. Maybe I'll save it for my Patreons. That would be interesting. Anyway, so Venus is generally the colour green. And if you think about like Mother Nature, when you think about Mother Nature, that beautiful, luscious green countryside you can almost imagine. But also Venus is a planet of wealth as well. And where we find Venus in the chart is where we can see earning potential. And, when we talk about, I know in the US, the currency is often denoted as green notes. It's definitely interesting to think about the symbolism behind the colour green as well. It is the most relaxing of colours. They do tend to to paint walls in hospitals and pick uniforms that are green. Not always. I know that times change, but it's a relaxing colour. It's supposed to put people at ease. The metal that goes with Venus, or that Venus rules, is copper. The part of the body which Venus rules. Now think about the word Venus. Now we've got veins, venous blood, the throat, female genitalia. Now, just to let you know, so the throat is a Taurus-ruled part of the body, and obviously we know that Taurus is ruled by Venus. The veins. Interestingly, I believe that blood is also Mars as well. So it's interesting, the crossover between Mars and Venus and the parts of the body there. And the key role of Venus, like I said, it's a relationship planet. It's about mirroring. So if you think about the fact that we were talking about the glyph actually does look like a hand mirror, but actually Venus is, interestingly, we learn about ourselves through other people. And Venus, the descendant as well, because Libra is the seventh. If you think about Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, Libra is the seventh. So the descendant in the chart, the seventh house cusp, is a very Venusian point. It indicates relationships, and it happens to be the opposite side of the ascendant, where the ascendant is about us and who we are and our point of view, our perspective. The descendant is other people, their perspective, their point of view. And when you meet someone, when you have a relationship with somebody, you learn about them, and through them you learn about aspects of your own personality as well. So it's always interesting, because I've said this before, I studied counselling skills, and one of my teachers said relationships are the vehicle of change. And it really struck a chord with me, because I'd always thought about relationships and just thought they're great. Relationships are, really wonderful. You get to meet people, and I'm a bit of a people watching type of person anyway, because I've got all that Aquarius stuff. So other people I find fascinating. I'm always interested to hear people's stories, and just enjoy other people. But I'd never thought about it as a point of growth and as a vehicle for change. And what is change but something that forces us into a situation where we have to adapt, develop ourselves, evolve, and eventually grow. So I think it's very interesting to think about relationships in that sense. Have you ever had a relationship where you didn't learn about yourself? And if you didn't learn about what you wanted, this is what I've always said about romantic relationships. I had a few. My very first relationship was horrific in every aspect that you could ever imagine. It was a terrible relationship. But what was great about it was I learned so much about what I didn't want in a relationship, what I didn't want from myself ever again. I learned a lot about self-respect from that relationship. and integrity as well. So I learned a lot. You do with relationships, and even some of the short-lived relationships, or some of the ones that are almost a blink of an eye in passing, that teach you about yourself. Maybe I revealed too much too soon, or I gave too much to that person. Why did I give so much to them? Why was I trying to open up to them so quickly? Why did I want to share so much with somebody who I hardly knew? That type of thing. And then you think, well, maybe it's because I am, A, very open and caring person, and B, perhaps I was ready to jump into something, and I was looking for something, and I thought that I found it in that person, and it wasn't them, and I wasn't discerning enough to realise that, So it's interesting to kind of think about your relationships and friendships, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and kind of figure it out. So very interesting with mirroring, because we do almost, when they say that thing about owners that look like their pets, or pets that look like their owners. There's something about falling for people who remind you of aspects of yourself. When we get into a relationship with somebody, often we find a common ground first, and that common ground is something we can build on, and then you have to work with the differences. So it's interesting that we have to find people that reflect something about us to ourselves, and then we are more open to going deeper with that person. Because if you don't have anything in common, it can be really hard to have any kind of connection with somebody. So it's interesting. And I think I may have mentioned last week about Mercury being one of the most important planets in relationship astrology, purely because you need to have that common ground, that conversation, that general understanding of, are we on the same page, or are we at conflict with each other in our perspectives and the way that we see the world, and that kind of thing. Venus is also very important, believe it or not, in relationship astrology. And Venus is important as well because there is an aspect of, if you had Venus square another person's Venus, you might find that their looks don't appeal to you. You just don't have the patience for the way that they are, maybe. I'm not saying that this is always the case and it's a hard and fast rule. There are other things that contribute, but it's interesting to take that into account. And maybe even if their Saturn was square your Venus, or their Uranus was square your Venus, or vice versa, you might find that Saturn square Venus could be that you just don't get any love from that person. Uranus square Venus could be that you suddenly find them incredibly attractive, and then you feel really repulsed by them, almost like in the blink of an eye, So it's just interesting to look at Venus in relationship astrology as well. And Venus is about relating to other people as well. I often find, obviously, Libras are very good with, they're very good and very diplomatic, often able to mediate very well. A strong Venus is a very good mediator. Venus is about compromise. It's about equality and about what's fair. And there's a sense of law about Venus, because Venus is a planet which wants equality for all. It wants everybody to be fair. So, you find often that in the legal profession, people who are lawyers perhaps tend to be quite Venusian, because if they've got into it for reasons of fairness and fair treatment, and with Venus especially, that sense of law, there is a kind of law about beauty, the golden ratio, and so it's interesting to think about how Venus can present. And you wouldn't necessarily think about sitting in a courtroom, somebody here might have a strong Venus placement. You might think Saturn, actually, because it's rules, but actually there's a sense of law about Venus. There's a sense of understanding natural laws and how we can work to make sure everybody gets a fair deal. So you might think that you might not realise it, but maybe the judge is a Capricorn, or maybe the judge has Saturn rising, but they might have a strong Sun Venus or Mercury Venus or something like that. Venus is also concerned with how we pleasure ourselves and other people, and by that I mean what we do, that we enjoy, the things that we like. So it could be that some people really love going to the spa like me, and going in the sauna and the steam room and the hydro pool and all of that. And for some people, their Venus placement could indicate that they just love to go shopping and they like to spend money. And for them, spending money is fun. For me, because I'm a Venus square Saturn person, spending money is not so easy on myself. Other people I don't mind spending money on, but myself I find it hard. And the other thing that I think is interesting, just to talk about a Venus point. The room I'm sitting in at the moment where I record my podcast and I see my clients, I have a big mirror behind me and I have a picture of my mum and my grandmother behind me as well in front of the mirror, and some little rocks like an amethyst and some tiger eye, and I've got some labradorite and septarian, some really nice stones that I love. And on one side of the mirror I've got a big pile of books, and on the other side of the mirror I've got a lovely big peace lily plant. And I think it's really interesting because I have a Venus-Mercury conjunction, which means that my chart ruler is Mercury because I've got a Gemini ascendant. So I guess I have a Venusian flavour to my chart. And for me, I put a lot of value in mercurial stuff because Venus is where we see value, what we get pleasure from, and Mercury is tied up with that for me. So for me, I've got a vanity point with a giant mirror, and right next to it I've got my big pile of mercurial books. And let's say, I've got Mercury and Venus in Aquarius, so there's all astrology books as well. It's barely anything other than astrology books. But it's just interesting to kind of think about where your Venus is and what it is you really love to. If you could spend money, what is it that you put on your list for Christmas, that you'd love to receive? What are the activities that you love getting up to? What do you really value? How do you think your time is best spent? I think that's really what it is. And for me as well, one of the other things I have to say about Venus and Mars, which other people may disagree about, is that I really think that Venus and Mars indicate what we prioritise. I think that Mars is a planet which describes how we go out and get what we want, and what we feel driven to pursue. So actually what we really desire, and if we desire something, we make it our priority. And Venus, on the other hand, is also about what we truly value. So actually, if you truly value something, that's going to be high on your list of priorities. And that I think was interesting. I think I've always kind of made that connection, but I don't know if anybody else describes Venus in that way, that it's a planet where you find what you prioritise. But it really is. It's about what we value, our moral code. And what we value it changes a lot. Before the whole lockdown coronavirus thing happened, I think our priorities were very different to what they are now. I think our values were really different. A lot of people now really value their family time, spending time with other people. And prior to that, I'm not saying that I didn't care about seeing my family and spending time with them. That's not true. But I think I had other stuff going on that I prioritised purely because day-to-day life was just normal and you just got on with what was going on. Whereas now we've had a reshake. Our priorities have been shaken up completely. So think about your priorities. What is it you prioritise? If someone said to you, I've got tickets to go to this online event, I've got an online art exhibition, would you be the type of person to think, that's a great use of my time, I would love to do that? Or actually, do you know what, I'd rather stay at home and just eat ice cream and watch Netflix and do this with my partner, there are certain activities that you'll be more likely to say yes to than others. And I think that that's where our Venus comes into play. Do you value this person that is asking you to go out with them? Is it a good use of your time? Do you enjoy new experiences, or do you prefer to just stay indoors and chill out? Or do you prefer to do something you've done before? Are you more of a let's go out and eat food type of person? Do you like to go out and have a big party and get really drunk and not really remember much, but you had a great time? Everybody's different in what they enjoy and also in what they choose to spend their money on. Venus is also how we adorn ourselves, the kind of things we choose to wear, the kind of things that we choose to spend our money on. So that's another thing about Venus, as well as all of that anyway. Venus is our receptivity as well, how receptive we are, and it's about what we attract into our life. So I believe someone was saying, I think it was Wade Caves, astrologer Wade Caves, talking about Muhammad Ali being quite a Venusian boxer, whereas most boxers would be on the attack. Muhammad Ali would almost lean back and invite the other boxer to lean into him to hit him, which is a very Venusian approach because it almost tempts him into his world, into his trap, basically. And then once they lean in, that's when he would go for them. That's where he would float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. So just an interesting little insight there. Do you have the powers of attraction? Are you able to attract people into your honey trap? Or are you not so tactful in that way? Do you have a different type of Venus placement where you're not so in touch with it and actually you're maybe a little bit more clumsy with the words you choose, maybe not so graceful? Have a little look at Venus in your chart and see whether or not you think that you've got what is a strong Venus placement or a weaker Venus placement based on your relationship with some of the things that I've been saying today. So, just very quickly, I did have a couple of sayings here. Oh, here's one. Because you're worth it, L'Oreal. That's so Venus. Such a Venus phrase. And just to summarise what I've got up here, it says here, how we relate to others, express affection and feel appreciated, harmony, values and relatedness, the urge to be sociable and express affections and the urge for pleasure, the need to feel close to others and share emotions. Another phrase I've got here, he who eats with the most pleasure is he who requires least sauce. I don't know whose phrase that was. I don't know whose saying that was, but I thought that was quite an interesting one because the first one, because you're worth it, L'Oreal, is quite, I think quite Libran actually. And this he who eats with the most pleasure is he who least requires sauce is more of a Taurian sensual Venus. So yeah, that's kind of it. At best, really, Venus is quite creative, very loving and sharing, generous, is happy to adapt to other people's plans, very peaceful and tactful and graceful and charming. At worst, she can be quite self-indulgent, emotionally demanding. There can be an inhibition of affections. She can be quite indecisive. In love with love, I know somebody who is terribly in love with being in love and just hops from one relationship to the next. And every time he breaks up with them, he writes a song about them. Very talented songwriter, incredibly good. But I just would be very wary dating somebody like that. I wouldn't want to end up as their, a song that they sing at every gig about me. Venus can be quite dissatisfied, quite weak and quite shameless. Just having a look to see if there's anything else we've got here. So yes, beauty, attractiveness, affections, the arts, thinking about Libra and Taurus when I talked about her in those kind of ways, in that kind of sensual way or in that aesthetic way that she can present herself. The female feminine archetype, eroticism. Suddenly I'm seeing Dita Von Teese. I haven't brought her chart up. Maybe I'll Google it in a second and see if she's there. But I'm getting that martini glass routine. She's got to have a strong Venus, surely. Femininity, like I said, finances, money is connected to this attractive quality. Glamour, hedonism, sensuality, sexuality, female sexuality. So that's quite a lot. I've got quite a lot there. And also, here's one at the end. You can't not have it. Well, vanity and voluptuous. Voluptuous is so Venusian. If you Google it, the Venus statues, which have been found all over the world, the goddess statues, and they are what looks like a pregnant woman, a big bulging stomach and great big boobs, and not the most flattering. If ever somebody got a photograph of me like that, I don't think I'd be too pleased. But these Venus statues are basically symbolic of the journey, the feminine journey of motherhood, I suppose. I'm guessing that. I mean, I haven't done great studies on it, but I just think it's really interesting that they appeared in different cultures all over the globe before we had any kind of connection to each other that we're aware of. So anyway, so that's kind of what I've done about Venus, what I've got covered on Venus. Now, let me just have a quick look and see if I can find Dita von Teese, because if we've got her chart, just to have a quick look at her Venus, do we have the astro.com chart? It doesn't look like there is one on astro.com, which is a shame. Maybe there is, but I just haven't found it. However, let's have a quick look at one of these charts anyway, just to see where her Venus is. Well, it says here she's a Libra sun. Any surprise? So she's a Libra sun, and she has Venus in Leo. So she has that very performance orientated Venus placement. But it's kind of standalone because she's got quite a lot of stuff in Libra, and she's got Mars in the final degrees of Virgo. So she's got Mars, Pluto, Sun, Mercury, Uranus, all in Libra apart from the Mars. Moon, Saturn in Gemini. Jupiter, it looks at the very beginning of Capricorn. Neptune in Sagittarius. And Venus sitting there in Leo. Who knows if she's got Leo rising? We don't know. That's so annoying when you don't have the ascendant. So anyway, let's have a quick look at the listener charts. Okay, so a chart that I have in front of me right now is Leah, who I've been speaking to on Instagram actually. And Leah has, I hope I'm saying her name right, Pisces rising, and Moon in Libra, a Venus ruled sign, and Sun in Aquarius. So unconventional, quirky Aquarius, a Sun-Mercury conjunction, no less. So there will be a strong mercurial flavour, somebody who likes to make connections and share information and learn, a curious soul. But Leah has Venus on the midheaven. So it's good to pick out. I thought this chart was a good one to look at just because we do have Venus very high in the chart, in Sagittarius as well. So Venus will be quite fun-loving and footloose, and Sagittarius is a great sign for being able to let go and to forgive. So I think this could be a very forgiving person, especially with Pisces rising and Jupiter rising in Pisces, and Jupiter being the traditional ruler of Pisces, but also the ruler of Sagittarius as well. So there's a strong sort of Piscean Sagittarian flavour to this chart already, just looking at it. And this then leads me to believe that Leah is driven to do something very meaningful with her time in her career. Hopefully what you do with your work is something that is you find meaningful and contributing to something bigger that can kind of impact, if not your social group, then do something for humanity in some way, that feels like you're doing something that maybe gives back a little bit. If not giving back, then improving it in some way. Sagittarius is a sign that is quite a global sign as well. So Venus in Sagittarius, it could well be somebody who really values different cultural experiences, like going travelling, trying different foods. And if you've not been travelling actually as, like the typical, maybe going to India and trying like that, it may be somebody who really enjoys lots of holidays all over the place. Now, Venus in your chart, Leah, it could also indicate a strong sense of fashion. Like I said, Venus is quite an attractive planet, so it could be that you're very into beauty and making the best of yourself. And like I said, I've seen Leah's Instagram page, so I know she's beautiful from seeing her pictures. And this is somebody who's probably known for being quite a peaceful person. This doesn't seem too belligerent a chart. However, you do have a Moon-Mars opposition, and that Mars does square Neptune. Oh dear, that's quite a difficult one for you, because this looks like you could meet some pushy people who are maybe a little bit overbearing, and they tend to get their way more. Hello, Lana. Just got a little fuzzy visitor coming. We've just got little baby Lana, who was just scratching away at the door. I guess Lana wanted to butt in on some of your time, Leah. What about Lana? She wants to make it about herself. Yeah, I definitely get a sense from your chart that relationships are very important to you. Oh, bloody cat. Relationships are very important. And that actually maybe you might sometimes put there's a real struggle with trying to make sure that you don't over-compromise. That's another Venusian problem, is compromising too much. And having a Libra moon, you're going to be the type of person who probably would rather avoid conflict. And I'm not saying that you can't get into conflict, because having Mars opposite the moon, you can be either Mars or the moon in that situation. However, it's more likely that it makes you feel uncomfortable to be in conflict with somebody else. So for the sake of peace for everybody, you would rather back down and let the other person get their own way. You could be very good at convincing other people of your way without them even realising. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out about your chart is that you do have a Venus-Saturn conjunction. Venus-Saturn is quite a controlled Venus, whereas maybe Venus in Pisces could be unconditional love, and Venus in Sagittarius is probably like limitless love. Saturn certainly places some limits and conditions on that Venus placement. So whether you are aware of it now or not, you may over the years soon realise that there are some conditions to your love. Conditional love is, it's something that you won't over-compromise, and that you do need to assert some boundaries as far as your relationships are concerned. It's somebody who's probably very good at money management. And actually, people that have Venus and Saturn on the midheaven, or Venus-Saturn contacts in the chart, find themselves sometimes working in fashion, whether they're modelling or whether they're into, fashion clothing. So yes, I did do an event a little while back where I met a lot of models, and a lot of them had like Venus-Saturn contacts in their chart. It's almost like where they can make money out of the way that they look. Their looks can be it can be a career choice almost. Interestingly, Saturn is an area of Saturn and Venus are both planets where we look in the chart where we can see earning potential. Saturn has the manifesting ability, and Venus has the attractive quality. So putting those two together, it can be quite a powerful one. It might mean that for a while you don't earn much because you have to gain the experience and the reputation, but as time goes on, you become known as either an authority for what you do, or people can trust and respect what you do, and then they want to invest in you. So having those two planets up there on the midheaven like that are by no means a curse. They're in fact probably quite a wonderful thing to have. But you also have Uranus up there as well, so that's a bit more unconventional and freedom-loving. And Neptune as well in Capricorn too. So you've got that big generational triple conjunction, Uranus, Neptune and Saturn, which happened in 19... So we've got here 1987 that you were born, 21st of January 1987. But right through the 80s up to the 90s, we had Uranus, Saturn and Neptune all kind of doing a bit of dance together. And it was very influential. It was a hugely influential period of time in our history. And your Venus being up there is feeding into it as well. So for me, when I look at Uranus, Neptune and Saturn, I do think about media, the way that the internet developed, and kind of that the whole development of this whole new modern technological age. So it wouldn't surprise me if in some way you are working with maybe online magazines or some kind of online media, broadcasting in some way. It could be that you're working in a media marketing agency, for example. But that kind of thing, that being in your midheaven, it's going to be bringing what the discoveries of the 90s into what you do today. So it'd be interesting to hear what you actually do. And you've currently got Saturn just about approaching your Mercury. So if you're finding things are getting a bit difficult and you're thinking very seriously about something in your life, quite possibly something to do with making the world a better place to be, and maybe having a bit of a tough time with some demanding friends, that it will pass. It will pass. It just happens to be dancing around very close to your Mercury at the moment. So hang in there, you'll survive, you'll be fine. So that is Leah's chart. I think I'll leave it at that today because I haven't got a lot of time to record this episode. And one more chart that I did want to look at. Well, actually, I thought I'd point out two celebrity charts. This one just for you to glance at. We've mentioned her before, Angelina Jolie. She actually does have a AA rating. Sun Gemini, Moon in Aries, and Ascendant Cancer. And she has Venus on the Ascendant. There's no denying how stunning Angelina Jolie is. And what else is interesting is that relationships have played a very public role in her relationship, in her public image, basically. So without having to go into too much detail about Angelina Jolie, we can take a look at her and see her as almost like a projection of that female, that beauty, that Venusian quality. She does look like a goddess. She is a goddess. Another goddess that I have decided to pick for you to look at is Marilyn Monroe. She has a AA rating again, and she has a Leo rising, another Sun Mercury here. She is a Sun in Gemini, Sun Mercury in Gemini, and Moon in Aquarius, Moon Jupiter in unconventional Aquarius. So Marilyn Monroe also, as we're speaking of Venus, has a Taurus midheaven. What degree is her midheaven? My eyesight's not that good anymore. I can't find my glasses. I have been looking for my glasses and I do not know where they are. And it's really annoying because I've had to get my old glasses out. And it's just typical that Mercury is going retrograde. I'm sure they'll return to me. I'm sure I'll find them. But yeah, I don't know where they've gone. But anyway, Marilyn has got a 6-degree Taurus midheaven. And she has Venus, which rules her midheaven. Is at 29, I believe it's 29, or is it 28? Venus, there we go, 28.45, so really close to 29 degrees of Aries. And it's just within orbit, or orb, we say within orb, of the midheaven, meaning she has Venus on her midheaven, in conjunction with her midheaven. And Marilyn Monroe is known, I mean, she's also got Neptune in her first house, which is the planet of glamour and sort of that lasting glamour, that kind of iconic kind of, just if you think about Marilyn, she's always going to be seen as a kind of a goddess, and she's still considered one of the most beautiful women of all time. And I think the Neptune really has a strong part to play in that. And also she has a Venus-Neptune trine. But anyway, let's not get bogged down with that. What we've got is somebody with Venus in conjunction with her midheaven, who is, when I look at Marilyn, I see the Taurus in her. It's interesting because I know she's a Sun Mercury in Gemini, so she's obviously mercurial, and I can see that too. She does have this very Taurian quality about her beauty. And Taurus is all about the body and sensuality. And Marilyn Monroe became known for being a positive body icon, positive body image icon. She wasn't a waif. She's a stunning woman, and she was also incredibly intelligent as well. And it was a shame because she, from doing my classes, and we've studied her chart a long time ago in the LSA, Frank was talking about how Marilyn always wanted to be seen as an intelligent woman, to be known for her mind rather than her body and her looks. But people could never get past her looks. She was always going to be typecasted as this dumb blonde. She's just beautiful. She hasn't really got anything important to say. But, she was a very intelligent woman, and she obviously was very successful as well. So Marilyn Monroe is somebody who, with Venus very high up there on the midheaven, you can really see how she became known for what she does. And just going back to that Venus-Neptune trine, people idolised. She was a very, I think some women didn't like her because they were like, well, she's just a woman, she's just another woman, But there is this kind of iconic idolising sort of nature about Venus and Neptune getting together. It's very romantic. It's definitely rose-tinted glasses, it's very... the problem with Venus, Neptune, it's just not very realistic. And that's the thing about Marilyn Monroe. There is nothing realistic about still finding... there's nothing wrong with still finding her attractive, but she's been gone a long time now. She died young, and she'll always be remembered for who she was at that young age, rather than having to ever get old. It's not we've not had to deal with that. Looking at her, as people who are outside of that bubble and looking in, we are idealising her. We are putting her on a pedestal. She is a goddess that was sacrificed at a young age. Whether or not you think that she was killed or whether she killed herself, the controversies around that, there are so many different ideas. However, it is very interesting to think about what that means in a Venus-Neptune sense. She's always going to be part of our... she's almost a goddess archetype, a modern goddess archetype. So, I just thought I would just bring up Marilyn for you to have a look at and enjoy that chart. And, if you haven't ever seen any of her films, I really loved... what's the one with Jack Lemmon in it? Oh gosh. Why do I always do this? I always bring up a film and I can't remember what it's called. I think it's Some Like It Like That, or... Yeah, either way, it's a great film. I'll put a link to it. But yeah, she's such a stunning, beautiful, iconic goddess figure, which I think she really kind of epitomises Venus in so many ways. So yeah, that's kind of it for today. I thought I would just talk to you about Venus, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you are enjoying the podcast, definitely give me a review. I just want to say thank you to Jess, who I saw this week, my client Jess, who has also submitted her chart, and we'll discuss your chart at some point, Jess. But she also left me a lovely review on the the Amazon Music Store, I think it was. So thank you so much for leaving me a wonderful review. And if you guys are enjoying what I do and you'd be interested to have more content that I'm creating exclusively for my Patreons, then check out my Patreon page. I will leave a link for you in the description. But for now, let's call it a day. I'm tired, I am thirsty, and it's time to go get myself some food. I'll speak to you next time. We'll be discussing our final personal planet, Mars, and really getting to the nitty-gritty of what Mars means in your chart. Okay, you guys, take care, and I'll speak to you next time.